Efforts are underway to provide cybersecurity assistance to state and local authorities and actions to investigate, prosecute, and hold accountable those who illegally attempt to interfere in our political and electoral process. To address these matters further, I want to welcome Director of National Intelligence Dan Coates, FBI Director Christopher Wray, Secretary of Homeland Security Kirstjen Nielsen, Director of the National Security Agency General Paul Nakasone, and National Security Advisor Ambassador John Bolton to make some comments and take questions on this topic.
Since January 2017, the President has taken decisive action to defend our election systems from meddling and interference. This includes measures to heighten the security and resilience of election systems and processes, to confront Russian and other foreign malign influence in the United States, to confront such aggression through international action, and to reinforce a strong sanctions regime.
In regards to Russian involvement in the midterm elections, we continue to see a pervasive messaging campaign by Russia to try to weaken and divide the United States. These efforts are not exclusive to this election or future elections, but certainly cover issues relevant to the election. We also know the Russians try to hack into and steal information from candidates and government officials alike.
The progress we have made is real, and the nation's elections are more resilient today because of the work we are all doing. But we must continue to ensure that our democracy is protected.
So just a few examples of some of the things we've seen over the past. Targeting U.S. officials and other U.S. persons through traditional intelligence tradecraft, criminal efforts to suppress voting and provide illegal campaign financing, cyber attacks against voting infrastructure along with computer intrusions targeting elected officials and others, and a whole slew of other kinds of influence, like both overtly and covertly manipulating news stories, spreading disinformation, leveraging economic resources, and escalating divisive issues. But it's important to understand this is not just an election cycle threat. Our adversaries are trying to undermine our country on a persistent and regular basis, whether it's election season or not.
As part of its mission to defend the nation, the Department of Defense is providing intelligence, information support, and technical expertise to the Department of Homeland Security for use by state and local officials to prevent foreign interference in our elections. This is a vital mission for us and the nation.
Our focus here today is simply to tell the American people we acknowledge the threat. It is real, it is continuing, and we're doing everything we can to have a legitimate election that the American people can have trust in. In addition to that, it goes beyond the elections. It goes to Russia's intent to undermine our democratic values, drive a wedge between our allies, and do a number of other nefarious things. And we are looking at that also. But today we are here to talk about the elections coming up and what we're doing, ensuring the American people will have legitimate.
Director Coates, how would you characterize the current Russian efforts to meddle in the 2018 election relative to 2016? Is it more intense? Do you see those efforts focused on a particular party? And in general, is the pace of those operations in any way relative to 2014, 2012, or is it more intense?
Relative to what we have seen for the midterm elections, it is not the kind of robust campaign that we assessed in the 2016 election. We know that through decades, Russia has tried to use its propaganda and methods to sow discord in America. However, they stepped up their game big time in 2016. We have not seen that kind of robust effort from them so far. As I mentioned publicly sometime just a few weeks ago, we're only one keyboard click away from finding out something that we haven't seen up to this particular point in time. But right now, we have not seen it.
To follow up, sir, do you see it directed to any particular party? The current 2018 efforts, is there any particular party that is benefiting from current 2018 Russian efforts?
What we see is the Russians are looking for every opportunity, regardless of party, regardless of whether or not it applies to the election, to continue their pervasive efforts to undermine our fundamental values.
In the run-up to the Helsinki summit, U.S. officials, ambassadors to NATO, ambassadors to Russia, said that the president would raise the issue of a malign activity with President Putin. But he didn't discuss that, at least at the press conference.
The issue was discussed, and in fact, President Putin said, I thought at the press conference, but certainly in the expanded bilateral meeting when the two leaders got together with their senior advisors, President Putin said the first issue that President Trump raised was election meddling.
What we are seeing are the malign influence operations, in effect information warfare that we've talked about, and that didn't really, that's a 24/7, 365 days a year phenomenon that doesn't turn necessarily on whether or not we're in the middle of an election season or not. But as Director Coates said, any moment is just a moment before, you know, the dial can be turned up one, much as we saw in 2016. Again, not in terms of affecting the vote count, but in terms of potential penetration of voter registration databases or something like that. And that in turn can be a vehicle for them to try to sow discord or undermine confidence. And we have to make sure we're pushing back on it, which is what we're doing.
So my guidance and the direction from the President's Secretary of Defense is very clear. We're not going to accept meddling in the elections. And it's very unambiguous.
Ivanka Trump made two statements this morning at odds with the positions of her father. She said the media are not the enemy of the people, and also called family separation at the border a low point. But what does the president think of those statements?
Certainly the president himself has stated that he doesn't like the idea of family separation. I don't think anybody does. We also don't like the idea of open borders. We don't like the idea of allowing people into our country if we don't know who they are, where they're going, and why they're coming. The president wants to secure our borders, which is why he has asked Congress to fix the law.
At the end of the day, to get China back to the negotiating table the way they were at the negotiating table with American trade officials just a few months ago?
The goal at the end of the day is to end the unfair trade practices that China has engaged in for decades and that the administrations before this president have ignored.
Has there been any evidence whatsoever that Russians are trying to help Democrats in 2020?
Well, I think you can see just from what took place over in the Facebook. I know Director Wray wasn't at liberty to speak about the specifics, and I can't get into a lot of them, but I can tell you that a number of them were anti-President Trump, and that certainly isn't helping Republicans.
20 states attorney general that have already said that they will sue this administration. This is part of their complaint. They say freezing or weakening these standards put the health of our children, seniors, and communities at risk. It also increases the rising cost of climate change for our states. The administration's response would be what?
That the reporting that we're reversing Obama-era fuel efficiency standards and preempting the tougher California standards is simply false. What the EPA released yesterday was a notice of proposed rulemaking, not a final rule. The notice lays out a series of options for how to go forward with CAFE standards, and the notice asks for comments on the range of options. We're simply opening it up for a comment period, and we'll make a final decision at the end of that.
Is the administration, as part of this election security push, also looking to do a voter ID law to try to push something like that through Congress?
Look, we're looking to do everything we can at this point to protect the 2018 elections, the integrity of those elections, and moving on beyond 2018 to 2020 and after. We haven't made a final decision, but certainly looking at every option available to us. It's not unreasonable. If I return something to a department store, if I have to cash a check, I have to show my ID in order to do those things. It's not outrageous that if you're going to vote to decide on who the leaders of the local communities, your state, and the federal government are going to be, that you would be asked to show an ID. Jim?
I just wanted to follow up on Sarah's question from NPR. She asked you about Ivanka Trump's statement that the press is not the enemy of the people. And she asked you whether or not the press is the enemy of the people. You read off a laundry list of your concerns about the press and things that you feel like are misreported, but you did not say that the press is not the enemy of the people. And I think it would be a good thing if you were to say right here at this briefing that the press, the people who are gathered in this room right now, doing their jobs every day, asking questions of officials like the ones you brought forward earlier, are not the enemy of the people. I think we deserve that.
I think the president has made his position known. I also think it's ironic.
Would you mind telling us,
I'm
Sarah,
trying to answer your question.
Okay, well,
I politely waited, and I even called on you despite the fact that you interrupted me while calling on your colleague.
Well,
I said it's ironic.
Which is why I interrupted.
I'm trying.
But if you finish, if you would not mind letting me have a follow-up, that would be fine. But
it's ironic Jim, that not only you and the media attack the president for his rhetoric when they frequently lower the level of conversation in this country. Repeatedly, the media resorts to personal attacks without any content other than to incite anger. The media has attacked me personally on a number of occasions, including your own network, said I should be harassed as a life sentence, that I should be choked. ICE officials are not welcomed in their place of worship, and personal information is shared on the internet. When I was hosted by the Correspondents Association, of which almost all of you are members of, you brought a comedian up to attack my appearance and call me a traitor to my own gender. In fact, as I know, as far as I know, I'm the first press secretary in the history of the United States that's required Secret Service protection. The media continues to ratchet up the verbal assault against the president and everyone in this administration, and certainly we have a role to play, but the media has a role to play for the discourse in this country as well.
And sir, if you don't mind, if I may follow up, excuse me, you did not say in the course of those remarks that you just made that the press is not the enemy of the people. Are we to take it from what you just said, we all get put through the ringer, we all get put in the meat grinder in this town, and you're no exception. And I'm sorry that that happened to you. I wish that had not happened. But for the sake of this room, the people who are in this room, this democracy, this country, all the people around the world are watching what you're saying, Sarah, and the White House for the United States of America, the President of the United States should not refer to us as the enemy of the people. His own daughter acknowledges that, and all I'm asking you to do, Sarah, is to acknowledge that right now and right here.
I appreciate your passion. I share it. I've addressed this question. I've addressed my personal feelings. I'm here to speak on behalf of the president. He's made his comments clear.
On another matter, the National Archives told the Senate Judiciary Committee chairman today that they probably aren't going to be able to finish up the document collection regarding Brett Kavanaugh until October. That's obviously later than the timetable I know you guys and Senate Republicans are hoping for. Any comment on that, or any potential assistance that the White House can give the archives in accelerating that?
Certainly, we want to be as helpful as possible in turning over as many documents. Several senators have stated there will be up to and over 1 million pages of documents to review, including over 300 judicial opinions. His documents as staff secretary tell us the least about his judicial thinking than the 1 million pages from his other work, including his judicial opinions. We want a thorough evaluation. We've asked for that, but we don't want a taxpayer-funded fishing expedition. We want to continue to be cooperative, and that's exactly what we're going to do. I'll take a last question, Jordan.
One more from the right side. Thanks, Sarah. I want to follow up on the third part of Jill's question from earlier on North Korea. We're nearing now the 2-month mark from the Singapore summit. So is the president satisfied with the progress North Korea is making toward denuclearization?
The president won't be completely satisfied until all of Korea has been denuclearized. We're going to continue moving forward. We've seen steps of progress and continued cooperation. We're incredibly grateful and thankful for the remains of the service members that were returned yesterday, and we're going to continue to work with North Korea. I think that's a great place to close out. Thanks so much, guys. Have a good day.